Okay, welcome back, everybody. Listen, we'll just keep going. I'm actually quite enjoying this webinar. I'm learning. Mum's just been diagnosed with dementia and time to get her affairs in order. She seems to have lost all confidence, given up hope, and just stays in all day. She used to be so social. I'm not sure whether I'm in front of the letters there. I'm trying to lead out of the way.
And so, to be fair, some of this will already have been answered in other questions. But unfortunately, it is really common that somebody is diagnosed and basically they are given a life-limiting, a devastating diagnosis. And then they're told, right, the important things are get your enduring power of attorney written up and your will. And of course, that's the last thing they want to hear. They want to hear how to be supported with their diagnosis, not to go off and start dying from this diagnosis. And there is this thing called prescribed disengagement. So this term comes from a lady called Kate Swaffer. Now, Kate has young onset dementia, so she was diagnosed when she was 45 years old. And she's an amazing lady. So she's a nurse, and she was a nurse educator at the time. And she was diagnosed with dementia and, like Mum, been told, off you go, it's all downhill from here, go and get your EPOA done and your will done and make sure your husband and your children know what your wishes are. And she had no doubt a few months of a lot of tears and upset, and then she said, I am not going to start dying from this condition. I am going to learn how to live well with this condition. And she termed this prescribed disengagement term as what happens when people are diagnosed. And unfortunately, it is very, very common that's done. So in some ways, I can understand why prescribed disengagement, so go off and get your affairs in order, is uppermost when health professionals give the diagnosis of dementia, because it is a life-limiting condition and it's a life-shortening condition. And so from a very clinical point of view, the best thing you can do is get your affairs in order. But for the person with dementia, like I said, that is the last thing they want to hear. But that life-limiting diagnosis triggers that thought probably in all of us. What we should be doing, of course, is having an enduring power of attorney and our will set up long before we reach the stage when we've got a life-limiting diagnosis. We should all be doing it at 18, 19, 20 years old, but we just don't. So it does trigger those thoughts in the clinical professionals. And Adrian's just made me laugh by moving himself out of the picture.
I'm trying to get out of the way of the letters and I can't quite work it out. Sorry.
You were gliding. It's back to front on the screen. That's the challenge. Everything goes in the opposite direction.
Like dancing usually.
Who would know? So what Mum's been told, again, unfortunately, is very normal. And again, we're trying to turn that narrative around. Don't go home and start preparing for a progression towards death with dementia. Go home, react in a normal way, which is a grief reaction, get support that helps you through that grief reaction, and then start living your life with and despite this condition. Again, it's really common for people to lose confidence. So if you or I were told we had this devastating diagnosis and we'd heard that narrative again, it's all downhill, I'm demented, then you would lose confidence. Because if we've heard those terms, then everybody else in society has heard those terms as well. So one of the ways we can support people when they start to lose confidence is to be there for them, to not try and correct any information that they're giving that is incorrect, because that serves to reduce their confidence further. So a lot of the time, again, for understandable reasons, when somebody's diagnosed, we as family members, as health professionals, we start asking them lots of questions to test their memory, in effect. We feel this huge urge to say to people with dementia, can you remember who I am? Can you remember who this is in the picture? Do you know what today is? Do you know what the time it is? And all we're doing is serving to highlight their deficits, and their confidence continues to plummet. What we're trying to do is gauge where they're at with their dementia. So we actually need to stop doing that. Once they're diagnosed, we know they have memory problems. We, as a general rule, don't need to keep testing that. There will be times through their journey with dementia when health professionals will have a need to test that. But as just people around somebody with dementia, we need to stop testing their memory, because it really starts to dent their confidence. So again, really normal that mum has started to stay indoors. She doesn't want to go out. She doesn't want people to be aware that she's got dementia. She doesn't want to be that person who is demented or losing their marbles. So again, education, really important to help people to start living well with their diagnosis. It's important that we have dementia-friendly communities. So Adrian and I go out a lot and we talk to quite random different communities, not just about dementia, but how society, how communities can be much more dementia-friendly, and how we can stop denting the confidence of people with dementia. But it is really hard to watch mum suddenly become unsocial when she used to be so social. But again, part of that might just be a normal reaction to having a devastating diagnosis.
So did you think, can I just touch on that for a second though? Like, I mean, if we wanted mum to go back, and mum was interested in our bowls club, we've got a close group of friends down there. It's not always easy for the friends, is it either? They're not quite sure how to react, and they tend to withdraw as well. So how can you support that, or how can you help that?
So again, a lot of it is changing the narrative and making sure people are well educated about dementia. And friends generally fall by the wayside, primarily for two reasons. One is they don't know what to say to the person. And the other reason is it might highlight a fear in them that they may also be close to developing dementia. So there's a couple of reasons why friends drop off. So again, it is about giving people the right information, supporting them, and doing things when it's right for the person with dementia. So we can get all enthusiastic and go, right, Frida, your world's closed down. You used to play bowls. Off we go. We're going to go along to bowls and make sure that you can play bowls again. It might be too much for that person. And we do need to be aware that people with dementia, again, at any part of their progression, so it's not at a particular stage, can become really overwhelmed with lots of people, lots of information. So it might be for a while they actually do need to be quiet in their homes and get used to having this condition. And then we start helping them to get used to living. But it is a lot of education, and sometimes it's trial and error. Have we got the right time to start opening the world back out? It is people putting their hands up and getting educated about dementia, which again can be difficult because people don't know where to go to. But there are a few organisations out there. There's a lot of Googling you can do, but be very mindful that not all Google information is good information. I mean, from EnlivenPlus point of view, like I said, we're not just delivering a service. We are really open to just helping people understand. And I had a lady phone me last week. She'd seen the little article that we've been doing in the paper. And I think it ends something like, give Ruth a call if you want to ask anything. And I answered the phone, and I could hear a voice in the other end of the phone saying, no, I can call her. You're allowed to. I'm sort of going, hello? And I know, we're allowed to call her. I'm like, hello? And, oh, is that Ruth? Yes. We're allowed to call you. Absolutely, you are. So helping people to understand they can just pick up a phone and call and get advice. And this lady just wanted to know. She didn't want the service. And she said, my husband's got dementia. He's stopped eating. He's not eating as well as he used to. what can I do? I don't know what to do. So I just gave her a bit of advice and she was quite happy. So again, it's getting the message out there that there is support out there, but the support can be really hard to find at times.
It's interesting. I acutely remember somebody, again, within the focus group, she said, listen, we need people who can come in and see us, who can ask the right questions. And what she was saying was, and it's a mistake that I've made myself in the past, where I can ask somebody a question followed by another question, you know. So there's two questions within the same question, not realizing that I had to keep it very, very simple. So there's lots of very simple advice that people can get, is there, for how to interact with somebody with dementia.
Yeah, and you picked up one of the key ones when we're interacting with somebody with dementia. And again, it doesn't matter what stage they're at. Even if they're at the earlier stages, we give them the benefit of the doubt. We allow their brain time to absorb what we're saying to them. So there's a 30-second rule. So when, if I say to you, Adrian, what's the day of the week? Then chances are, if you know what the day is, for that looks like maybe you don't. But you're going to give me an answer pretty rapidly within 1 or 2 seconds. And that's normal conversation. We ask a question, we get an answer, even if it's a I don't know answer, very quickly. If somebody doesn't give us that answer quickly, or as quickly as we think is normal, then what we tend to do, and if the person's got a diagnosis of dementia, we do things which we think are trying to help them. So I might say, do you want something to drink, Adrian? So Adrian doesn't answer. He's got dementia. So I'm like, okay, he hasn't understood my question. Would you like a hot drink, Adrian? Would you like tea? Would you like coffee? So I start rewording it in the hope that I'm helping you to understand, would you like something to drink? What's going on in your brain is you're trying to comprehend that very first question I asked you, and I'm not giving you enough time to that. And I'm actually confusing your brain more by asking you question after question after question. So the 30-second rule is you ask a question, or you give a piece of information, and then you stop talking for 30 seconds to allow the person's brain to take that information in and turn it into thought processes that are useful, and then provide an answer. And it's really hard not to talk for 30 seconds, partly because that's how communication normally happens, but partly because we want to help as well.
Yeah, listen, I would love to, we must remember to do it. I'd love to do a full webinar on understanding how to interpret what is being said or what's not being said. Because, you know, for me, if I had dementia and I'm trying to, if I'm confused, I might react a certain way. It might get frustrating. So we can talk about that on a separate time. Yeah. I think there's a whole topic to go through there. Anyway, moving on. This is a common one as well. Why would I get a diagnosis if I could potentially lose my driver's license?
So I'm just jotting down a question for myself before I forget it. So the driver's license or loss of driver's license question comes up again an awful lot. But basically what people need to know is that if you're diagnosed with dementia, that is not an automatic trigger for your driver's license to be taken away. So driver's licenses, when somebody has dementia, will almost certainly, as the person progresses and becomes unable to judge distance and speed, or to concentrate long enough, that the driver's license will be revoked at some point, and that's to keep them and everybody else safe. And that's no different than if you have any other kind of condition that interferes with your ability to drive safely, then your driver's license is going to be reviewed. But when somebody's driver's license is taken away, there's usually quite a long process that has to be gone through. And it can involve an on-road test, and there are specialist testing centres that understand dementia. And they look at the skill set of somebody with dementia and are they safe to drive. those on-road testing centres might restrict the person's licence in some way as opposed to taking it away. So it might be that somebody with dementia who is still safe to drive but is starting to become perhaps a little bit unsafe, they might be told they can drive between 10 o'clock in the morning and 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's my dogs. Or it might be that I've forgotten. Put me off. So little dog sat in the corner wanted to say hello. Hello, Bella.
I think this is anybody who works from home nowadays and
yes.
works with Zoom understands exactly this. Children entering the room.
Thank you. Goodness me. So the other restriction is they might be given a maximum number of kilometres away from their home that they can drive. So they might be told no other restrictions apart from please don't drive more than 15 kilometres away from your home. The things we look for and what family can look for to start to indicate whether the person is unsafe to drive or not is, it's dad's car. So have a little look at dad's car. Are there a number of dents and dings that have suddenly appeared out of the blue? And that's probably an indication that he's not as safe as he used to be. A simple thing you can do is actually ask the police, have you stopped my dad at any point for unsafe driving? So again, that's a clear trigger that something is starting to happen. What we call the gold standard question is we ask, say, the adult child of somebody with dementia, would you allow or would you be comfortable with your mum, your dad, picking up your grandchildren from school and bringing them home? And they react instinctually and we read their facial expressions and it's either, yeah, absolutely fine. And we go with a probably safe to drive, but oh my God, no, I would not let my dad pick my children, my grandchildren up from school. So that tells us how challenging it is. There is a reason to be worried about the person's driving. But a diagnosis of dementia does not automatically lead to a driving licence being revoked.
Yeah. But I guess this also does lead on to that other question there, and I know we've sort of debated this a little bit previously, but there is a resistance to getting a diagnosis of dementia, whereas the medical profession does advise to try and get a diagnosis as early as possible. There's pros and cons, isn't there, with each of those? Yeah. I know you're very much on one side of those, but
well, no, I sit between the middle a lot. So my professional head said, yes, get your diagnosis of dementia as early as you can in your journey with dementia, because potentially that does open up the door for some short-term treatments that we can't prescribe later on in the journey with dementia. The challenge is that diagnosis dementia has so many negative connotations around it. It's a frightening diagnosis. I think from memory, being diagnosed with dementia is more scary than being diagnosed with cancer, stroke, and heart disease combined. So it's the scariest diagnosis people can receive. And there's never a right time. Again, it has to be right for the person with dementia. So when I talk to GPs, we very much say to GPs, it's actually your duty of care to give a diagnosis that you know about. The diagnosis doesn't belong to the GP, it belongs to the person with dementia. So they shouldn't be controlling that diagnosis. If the person with dementia goes, don't want to know about it, that's fine. They're making their choice. But if you don't give them the diagnosis, how can they start living well with a condition they don't know they have? Also sitting in amongst that is most people with dementia know something's going wrong. They know they're starting to do things differently. They know they're having struggles with doing stuff. They know that they've got memory problems. And sometimes the diagnosis comes as a relief. And people literally say, I thought I was going mad. I thought I was developing some kind of mental health problem. I'm really relieved. I now know what is going on and why I'm doing these things. Before I didn't know why. And I couldn't tell my family what was going on. Now we know what is causing what is happening to me. But it is hard to get that diagnosis. Again, unfortunately, some health professionals still hold the belief that it's a completely negative diagnosis. There's nothing you can do. So why bother the person? Why upset them? And that's where cancer diagnosis used to sit about 20, 30 years ago. So it's very common for people with cancer not to be told their diagnosis for fear that it would upset them, or it would just be a huge piece of information for them. Cancer has now moved completely towards where we need to go with dementia, which is you're open about the diagnosis. The diagnosis belongs to the person. It's then up to that person how they live with that diagnosis and whether they choose to not acknowledge it. Some people with cancer go, okay, I understand why I've got all these symptoms now. I either choose to live my best life with cancer, or I choose for things to take their course, and I'm happy with my life so far. Dementia needs to get closer to that realm. But there is a huge fear around being diagnosed. And again, it's that negative narrative that's out in the ether all the time.
So important. There's better understanding and awareness, isn't it? Listen, we've talked a lot around the memory side of things, but if I can now sort of touch on, I guess, the feelings side of things. What's happening? So if mum and dad have been together 40 years, dad was diagnosed last year, can you help me understand what they might be feeling? This is a son or a daughter, I guess. I feel so helpless at the moment.
Yeah. Again, unfortunately, unless dad has been diagnosed through a very well-informed process, they will be feeling the shame, the negativity that people do feel following that diagnosis. They're also going to be frightened about the future ahead. Almost certainly one or both of them will have a grief reaction. And you can actually get counselling, grief counselling for the future that is now lost to you. So most people think that grief counselling is there only if somebody has died and you're grieving for them. But grief counselling is about the future you may now not have because of a diagnosis. And that helps people cope with the diagnosis. But I guess mum is going to be very worried about how husband is going to be stigmatized. She might feel guilty. They both might feel guilty that they didn't do something they could have done to stop this diagnosis happening, this dementia thing happening. The best thing you can do, as you say, it's probably from an adult daughter or adult child, is to be with them the same as you would be if somebody had died and they were going through that grieving process. So allow them space and time to grieve for what they feel they are going to lose in the future. Do helpful things that you do for anybody else. Pop in, say hi, just phone them up. Are you all right? Take them a nice meal, take the pressure off and allow them space to grieve for a while. There's no magic one answer that is going to make life better for them. But again, get yourself educated, give them positive information, help them to understand about living well with dementia and not dying from or despite this condition.
Yeah, and what about the, from mum's point of view, like it's, there's a transition, is there, that starts to take place between, your spouse, your lover, your partner, to a slight change in the relationship?
Yeah.
We'll talk to it in more detail at a later date, but is it something you see a lot?
There's a huge transition that usually takes place really slowly, which is why a lot of people get to the point of crisis, because they don't actually realise how much they've taken on. So I guess most couples, and particularly if mum and dad are of an older generation, they'll have quite set roles. So dad will probably be the one that does the tinkering around the house. He goes out and does the gardening. Mum has more of a caring role and does the cooking, the cleaning and the washing, in broad terms. And that's not at all unusual. So over time, as dad starts to become more and more affected with the dementia, mum will very slowly take on more and more and more of those roles. Some of those roles she might not have taken on before. So a traditional role is the husband will take on paying the bills and organising those kind of things, dealing with the bank. All of a sudden, as dad becomes less able to do those things, mum will start to need to talk to the bank, organise bills, do direct debits or whatever it is, and actually might need an awful lot of support to be able to do those things if she's never done them before. And again, over the years, as this progression takes place, mum will gradually take on more and more of dad's roles in the couple without realising, without asking for help. So as an adult daughter, it would be really great just to pop along and keep checking in with her. Is there anything I can help you with? Mum, in the modern day, a lot of people do banking online. Shall I help set that up with you, or would you like to do it more traditionally? Also, there is a big adjustment from moving from husband to wife to moving to carer of somebody with a condition that is devastating. A lot of spouses don't like to be referred to as carers because they say, I am not my husband's carer, I am my husband's wife. And they don't like the fact that we're intimating that wife role, the spouse role, has disappeared. They're still the husband, the wife of that person with dementia. They're just taking on different roles. So it is really challenging, but keep checking in. Are you okay? What can I do to help? And if you notice that mum is struggling or is not coping with the change in roles, then put your hands up and ask for help.
Great, thanks. This sort of falls into, I'm going to have to try and move myself a little bit one way or the other out of the way of this. But it is, I mean, this is obviously Kitwood's model. We know Kitwood's model, and it's quite a useful way, I think, of you explaining, isn't it, some of the most important things for people with dementia?
Yeah, so Tom Kitwood is a dementia guru. And there's a term called person-centered care that has been bandied around for many years. And unfortunately, like many other terms in dementia circles, person-centered care is poorly understood. And most people think that person-centered care is about going in to dress the person at the time that they prefer, and that is not person-centered care whatsoever. So person-centered care is all around understanding the person before they had dementia and how their personality, their life experiences, how their medical conditions, if they're in pain, how all of that is impacting on the presentation that we find they have now with dementia. And Tom Kitwood has this lovely little thing that I can just about see, and in the middle of it is love. So primarily, what human being doesn't want to be loved? Just because you've got dementia doesn't mean to say you don't want to feel loved by somebody and be able to give love back to somebody. So sitting around that petal of things like attachment, comfort, identity, occupation, and inclusion. So basically all that's saying is the person with dementia needs to experience feelings of security. So I feel safe with the people that are around me. They need to have feelings of belonging. So I feel like I belong to this place that people keep telling me is my home, and I don't feel like I'm a bit of a nuisance in the way. They need to have experience of continuity. So having the same people deliver care and support to them is really important. They may never remember the name of the people that is coming in, but they will remember the emotional connection they've made to people. So nobody ever knows my name, and I don't expect them to know my name. Hopefully, the connection I'm making with people is through my demeanour, the respect that I give them, that dignity and the emotional stuff that I offer them. And when they see me, for me, it's amazing when somebody who has an advanced dementia, who goes from not knowing who I am at all to when I see them, I'm up their doorstep, their face lights up because they've recognised the emotion that comes with me. Also, people need to feel like they have goals. They have something to live for, something to aim for, and that they're working towards their goals. Above all, also, what is really crucial to anybody, and that's not just people with dementia, but it's really important that we make sure people with dementia are feeling this, and that is that they matter. Above everything else, they matter, and they matter to us.
Absolutely. And that they're included. We talked about it at the beginning, didn't we, about
Absolutely.
having a purpose to that day, you know.
And there's another little great saying from my friend Kate Swaffer, nothing about us without us. And what she's saying is, just because we have dementia, don't not include us in the conversations about our care and support.
Yeah, and that must be easy to happen, mustn't it? I'm guessing quite often you could easily bypass the person with dementia and talk straight to the wife, the husband, the primary carer. You know.
It's a little like there's been a lot of research and stuff done on it when somebody's in a wheelchair, and it's classic research. You pop somebody who is able into a wheelchair, you take them anywhere, into a shop, into health services. The person in the wheelchair is not spoken to. The person who is pushing the wheelchair is spoken to. Even if that person in the wheelchair actually has no disability of any level, they just happen to be sitting in the wheelchair, they're ignored. And it happens the same for people with dementia. They are spoken about as if they are invisible or not there, and it's no wonder people get annoyed. Often family members will speak on behalf of the person with dementia, and then they're not doing it to annoy the person. They're trying to make their loved one with dementia not feel stupid by not being able to answer questions, but they actually take a little bit of dignity away from that person by answering on their behalf.
Yeah, it's almost a loving disablement, isn't it, I guess?
Loving disablement, yeah.
Okay, and so this is one that we're starting to see a bit, isn't it? Especially with, I guess, families who live now in different towns or different countries. So this was a question: Mum's alone, I'm overseas. What does a dementia diagnosis mean for our family? What can I expect? And you know, I'm from the UK. If one of my parents had got ill back over in the UK with dementia, you know, it'd be a tough question to ask how you do care from a distance.
Yeah, and it's a tough one to answer, to be fair, partly because of those different causes of dementia. What to expect is as individual as the person. Even with Alzheimer's, we know, like I said, there's that global decline, and we can predict a little bit. But what we can't predict is how that individual is going to experience dementia. So if you and I both develop dementia and we have exactly the same damage in exactly the same place in our brain, we are both going to experience dementia differently. So it's really impossible to answer what can we expect for that individual person. But in broader terms, we can predict a little bit given the condition. The challenge, unfortunately, again, is particularly with the mixed dementia. Most people will be diagnosed with the most obvious cause of their dementia, and then the secondary cause never gets picked up because it sits behind. So even if somebody's diagnosed with Alzheimer's, they might also have stroke disease dementia or another cause for their dementia, but that never gets diagnosed. So what can we expect? Well, if we looked at somebody just with a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, we might get that very wrong if the secondary cause, the third cause, is not being picked up. So it's really hard to know what to expect. But in broad terms, the person living alone will need more and more support around them. They'll need people engaging with them, looking out for them, making sure they're getting everything they're entitled to, helping them through the health and support systems. What you can do is, again, a bit similar to the question before, is keep checking in with the person. Perhaps you might give a call through to, or actually write to their GP, asking them. So obviously GPs can't disclose unless you've got an activated EPOA. They can't disclose what's going on for your parent, but most GPs will talk in broad terms and recognise when there's challenges happening. But to make sure the GP's got the right information, pick up the phone and you can say to the GP, I know you can't answer my questions. I know you can't disclose any information, but please, listen to the information I'm giving you. And most health professionals will acknowledge, yes, we can't disclose, but we can listen. And that's quite a useful way to help the GP on the ground know what's going on.
Right. And just for people who don't know, EPOA?
Sorry, enduring power of attorney. So there's a couple of different types of enduring power of attorney. And again, we don't like to make anything easy. We like to make it as complicated as we possibly can. So there's enduring power of attorney for finances, and there's enduring power of attorney for health and welfare. There's also welfare guardianship, which is something similar but completely different. So anybody can set up an enduring power of attorney for finances or for health and welfare or for both. So with finances, you go along to your lawyer, your solicitor, and you say, I want to set this up. And basically you'll put in a legal process in place that says somebody else can, so this is just for finances, somebody else can take control of my finances for me. They can pay my bills for me or whatever it is. Now that enduring power of attorney can take effect from the moment you sign it. So if I go along to my solicitor and say, I want Mr. Adrian Toft to be my enduring power of attorney for finances, I can then literally go up to Adrian and say, I want you to take over my finances for me. Enduring power of attorney for health and welfare is quite different. So health and welfare is set up preempting at some point you may need somebody to talk on your behalf. So we should all have both of these in place. So if I set up my enduring power of attorney for health and welfare, sorry, going back one step slightly, for enduring power of attorney for finance, you can have more than one person being that attorney. For health and welfare, you can only have one named person to be your attorney for health and welfare. You can name somebody in reserve. So if I go to my lawyer and say, I want enduring power of attorney, health and welfare set up for me, I nominate Adrian Toft to talk on my behalf if I lose capacity. If Adrian dies, then I want Fred to talk on my behalf instead. So you can nominate a second person, but it's only that first named person that can actually be your attorney unless they step out or they decease. So with health and welfare, even though, say, Adrian is my named person, you cannot talk on my behalf until I have lost capacity and my health and welfare EPOA has been activated. And that involves a trip to the GP, or if I'm on a ward, the ward doctor literally writing a letter that says, Ruth has lost capacity to make these decisions, or to talk about her own health choices, or to go into care. So then that's activated, which means the health and welfare attorney can then start to speak for the person with dementia. But crucially, to understanding about what you can speak on is, so if you're my health and welfare attorney, you can't say to the doctors, I would like this to happen for Ruth because I think that's best for her. You can only say, this is what I genuinely believe Ruth would want for herself if she could verbalize what is happening. So it's not to speak from what you want to happen, it's to speak on behalf of the person, understanding that person and knowing what they would want if they could talk for themselves. So it's complex again.
It was a good comprehensive answer.
So there's a bit of another one to that, which is really important for dementia care. So you can only set up an enduring power of attorney while you have capacity. So if I have an advance in dementia, I go along to my solicitor and the solicitor thinks, I'm not understanding what I'm actually signing up to, they will not allow me to set a power of attorney up. And that's a good safeguard for people with dementia. What happens then is the person with dementia, if they lose capacity, they can't make health decisions for themselves. Somebody has to go to the family court to set up a welfare guardianship, which takes 6 months minimum and costs an awful lot of money. And the family court judge appoints someone to be the welfare guardian. The big challenge, apart from that taking a lot of time, and it only happening usually in a crisis, is it means, thank you, Bella, that the person that is appointed as my welfare guardian might not be the person that I want to be appointed. They might just be the only person around that put their hand up at that time. So it's always better to get your EPOAs done while you have capacity.
Great. Listen, one thing that did occur to me slightly earlier when we were talking about the family overseas, we've both become strong advocates within the program for this very simplified tablet called Kitkal, which does allow that connection from overseas and allows you to create reminders. Sounds like I'm doing a plug for Kitkal, but we see so much benefit in having that technology to still keep people connected, don't we?
I've actually got Kitkal sitting alongside me, which, if I remember in a minute, might show you. But yeah, Kitkal is, so initially when I looked at Kitkal, I was, as you know, a bit hesitant. I thought, I'm not sure about this electronic tablet taking away the place of human beings. But it doesn't do that whatsoever. It does sit alongside and complement. So Kitkal, one of the really useful parts of Kitkal is you can video call the person. So Kitkal is assigned to a person with dementia. And it is very simplified. There's just not even buttons. They're just icons on the screen that you touch. And there's only 4 of them. The person with dementia can't change those icons. They can't get on the internet, so they can't get scammed. The only people that can communicate through Kitkal are the people that have been actively invited on to do that, usually by an adult child. So if I've got dementia, I've got Kitkal sitting in front of me. Adrian's my adult child this time. So he sent the app, and through that app on your phone, you can then invite people in that you know are trusted and should be talking to me, or people that I feel confident talking to. So if people are overseas, it doesn't matter where you are in the world with Kitkal, as long as you've got the app on your phone, you can then have a video call with the person with dementia. You can have a normal audio call, or you can message them in a very simplified format that says, you know, whatever you want to say. Mum, are you okay? Just press the thumbs up button to let me know you're right, all right. And they press the thumbs up button, and the adult child gets a nice little message saying, yep, Mum's okay. So Kitkal is amazing. And it does help people that are not just overseas, but not living in the same town, to check in. And you can set reminders on there as well. So as adult child, I can set a reminder saying, Mum, at 6 o'clock every evening, just reminding you to make sure you've locked all the doors. At 6:30, again, a reminder's just said, Mum, just give me the thumbs up via Kitkal so I know that you're okay. So then you can go to bed yourself, knowing that Mum's locked the doors, she's shut the curtains, she's done whatever it is, and she's safe in her home. So it is amazing.
Yeah, and it will ring at that time, won't it? It'll just give that little ding that lets them know.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's, I'm just going to ask you a question, because I'm aware of the time. That's the time, and this is what happens when 2 people very passionate get talking. So one of the questions that was asked at the original webinar was, my husband has Parkinson's dementia, and is this the same as any other dementia?
Yeah, so as I said, what feels like a long time ago now, there's about 120 different causes for that group of symptoms we call dementia. Parkinson's disease is one of those potential causes. But if somebody is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease, it's not an automatic thing that they're going to go on and get the dementia associated with Parkinson's disease, which is called Parkinson's disease dementia. So at the minute, there's no testing, there's no way of knowing if somebody with Parkinson's disease is going to get Parkinson's disease dementia. There is a little window of time that gives us a little bit of an indication. So if somebody is diagnosed with Parkinson's disease today, if in 13 years' time they haven't developed Parkinson's disease dementia, they're probably not going to, but it's not a guarantee. So Parkinson's disease is just one of those causes for this thing we call dementia.
Fantastic. Listen, I think we're down to our last three questions. You've done incredibly well. So there was another question that was asked at the webinar, and I might be paraphrasing it slightly now. But if you had a magic wand, what would your wish be for carers? And I think this was primary carers, wasn't it, at the time?
It was, and I do remember the question. I think they asked what would be my one wish, and I think I ended up with 4. But I can't remember what they are. But for carers, my biggest wish is they are properly educated. So all of this fear, all of this misunderstanding is taken away, and they can start to help support their loved one with dementia to live with their dementia. That would be my biggest wish, proper education to help people understand this complex condition. Probably my second biggest wish is appropriate respite, because we know respite helps keep people at home for longer. We also know as a country, we are not doing respite well for people with dementia. There are hundreds of thousands of unused respite hours out there because people try the traditional respite once, it doesn't work, they don't do it again. So probably those are my biggest wishes for the primary care of somebody with dementia.
Fantastic. So moving to the next slide. Mum's no longer coping. I believe Dad should go into a home, but Mum won't contemplate doing this. They talk about a retirement village or care home. Which one will be better? Are they caring places? When is the time is right? Number of questions, obviously.
I was going to say just a short question then. So another almost impossible to answer question without knowing the circumstances of the person. But in very broad terms, there is no one right time. There is no particular stage of dementia when you should put somebody into care. Some people look after their loved one with dementia right up until death. And I absolutely hold my hat off to them. That is a phenomenal thing they can do for their family member. That's usually only possible when there is a large support circle around that person. Like I said, there's no right time. The usual triggers for somebody going into care is either the person that's caring for the person with dementia at home just simply is exhausted. They can't cope with it any longer. Not particularly because of any challenges around looking after the person. They're just so exhausted by it all. The triggers that will see people going into dementia-specific units, one of the biggest triggers is that the person has started leaving their home and they have unsafe walking. So they're going out of the home, they're becoming lost, they don't know where to go for help. So if you and I wandered out of our home in a confused state, we would hope we would recognise we could go to a police station, or we might recognise who is a friendly face and who's not a friendly face. So when people lose the ability to walk safely, then that can be a trigger to go into dementia-specific units. Another common trigger is when the person with dementia starts to what we term shadow the carer. So if there's a husband and wife, wife's got dementia, and husband's looking after the person with dementia, they're doing an amazing job, but the wife starts to spend 24 hours a day, physically very close to the person with dementia. They start following them around because they feel safe with their loved one. And if that loved one's out of their sight, they don't feel safe, they become agitated and distressed. That can become very, very emotionally challenging for the person that's caring for them, particularly if the person with dementia is following their loved one literally everywhere, to the bathroom. I mean, can you imagine if you can't even go to the toilet and go to the toilet in peace? You've got somebody stood alongside you who's distressed. So the unsafe wandering will often trigger admission to a care home, and that will be to a dementia-specific unit. The shadowing, depending on what interventions might be able to put into place to replace that comfort that they feel with their loved one, or whether that can be replaced or not with another person or another environment, then that shadowing often triggers admission to a care home. But there is no one right time whatsoever. Care homes are very different as well, and they cater for, in effect, different personalities. So some care homes are huge, and generally for people with dementia, a very large care home is too difficult for them to live in because they get lost in them, the same as I do when I walk around them. I'm not quite sure what floor I'm on and whether I turn left or right to get out of the building. Some homes are much smaller. Some homes have got gardens, some haven't got gardens. Some are very hotel-like, and if the person with dementia has lived a life where they've spent a lot of times in hotels, that might be the perfect home for them. If the person with dementia isn't comfortable with that style of living, then it's going to be the wrong home for them. So for me, what I suggest to people is if you're getting to the point you think somebody might need to go into care, go into as many care homes as you can, get a feel for that home. If it feels right, and you don't have to describe why it feels right, but you think, my mum's going to like this one, then that's probably the right one. But it's really hard. But again, try and do that stuff in advance of a crisis happening, and then you're having to put the person with dementia into just an available bed.
Okay, thank you. And the last question. Dad says he wants to remain at home, whatever. Sister and I have tried our best, but we have families and are not always around. What services are available to keep people in the community?
Unfortunately, not an awful lot. So a lot of the funded services, so the general process would be the person, whether they've got dementia or not, and a person over 65 will go to have a needs assessment through their local provider. The ones I know well are Bay of Plenty is SupportNet, and Waikato is DSL. So you have an assessment by these trained NASC assessors. They will look at all manner of different angles and needs, and they will tell you what the person is entitled to be funded to have support for. Generally, those supports are around, does the person need help with washing and dressing or household chores? Now, for people with dementia, that is not the most important thing in their life. The most important thing is that they have somebody to talk to, that they feel they can trust, they can have a giggle with. So unfortunately, that social support, which people with dementia absolutely crave and thrive on, is very poorly funded. There's a little bit funded out there, but for most times that social support you have to buy in as a private funded service. So in real terms, unfortunately, again, a lot of the systems are set up to support people to live in their own homes, but at a certain point, the system says, we can't give you enough support to remain at home. You'll have to start thinking about care.
Okay, Ruth, we've achieved a 2-hour webinar.
We really, and what we've done, we've ended on a sour note. So the good note is we can live well with dementia. And I'm not promoting EnlivenPlus, but I am going to promote EnlivenPlus. We do offer that service that does the social support, that educates, that genuinely helps people to live well with that diagnosis of dementia and keep people in their own homes for longer. So the negative narrative is out there, but please don't listen to that. There is another narrative to be had, and it's positive, it's full of fun, it's living well. Sorry, you were going to say.
I was just going to say thank you, but that was a really good ending to have on there. So thank you, Ruth.